Welcome everyone to the Runners Roundtable podcast. We're in season 2. I'm talking to different female run coaches, and today I am joined by Cristina Caldwell. You are a run coach, and I'm going to say maybe you have a little bit of knowledge on nutrition, and I cannot wait to dive into that bit because I'm currently training for the London Marathon, and based off of my previous training cycle for the Chicago Marathon, I know that nutrition is one of the hardest things to kind of get right as a runner, but also it's part of what makes it so hard is that our needs change as we age and as we go through different training cycles and whatnot. I find that I've try to not compare myself to those previous versions of myself because it's like that's a different person, different circumstance. But before we get into all of that, before I start to pick your brain on all of that, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us your running story?
Sure. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. And just, I don't know, a bit about myself. I'm a mom, I'm a run coach, a triathlon coach, a sports nutritionist, a wife, of course. And I've been running ever since really college is where I started. I swam in college. So I started off as a swimmer, and swimmers don't run. So that was a very interesting transition. But after I graduated from college and I swam Division I really needed something to do that was going to push my body as hard as I thought swimming did, but just something that I could do. So I just started a run. And that's kind of how I got into it. And I realized that I loved pushing my body hard and I love the mental aspect of it. So I thought, let me do something that's going to just be good for my body, but also from a mental standpoint, how can I push myself out of my comfort zone? And I guess, that was in 2004. So it's been a long journey through a lot of things in life, but love running, love coaching runners, love helping athletes achieve their dreams. And running is just one of the fun ways to do it.
Yeah. And I love that you bring up the mental aspect of running because that's something that it's definitely come up in a lot of these conversations. It comes up when I talk to people about running, where the physical act of running is one thing, but the mental aspect of running is a totally different thing. How was that transition for you from swimming to running? Because I can't even imagine being right now. I'm so in that headspace of runner that swimming, I feel like it would be like being a baby and not knowing where my body parts are in relation to one another and how to move. I'm sure that's probably very similar to a lot of people when they start running, where they're like, yes, I don't understand the mechanics of this. So how was that?
Yeah. It's almost, you can reverse it. For runners that get injured, the first thought is move to the pool, like swim, water run. And so I've helped a lot of runners to transition to the pool for injury or like surgery recovery, and then they're like, how do you swim? Like you're clunky and it's just awkward, and that's how it felt moving from as a swimmer in the pool. To me it's you're very graceful, you're very, maybe graceful is maybe not the right word, but you feel very smooth and fluid, and you're just kind of in one, like in sync with the water. And then you move to the ground and you're running, you're just like, you just kind of feel like you're plodding along, or like you're like, am I even doing this right? Like like running is innate, like, right, we all should run. and here you are feeling like you're just kind of like being like clunky and like I don't know, shuffling or so it definitely was an interesting experience. Like I learned that I was not engaging any of the right muscles when I ran, because I had initially the knee pain and IT band issues, and just the muscles you use in swimming are, they're similar, but you're one is swimming based, one's land based, and so there wasn't that impact. So I had to spend a lot of time learning how to engage my glutes and learning how to just activate the right muscles. So when I did run, I was running with more efficiency and power, which as a swimmer was totally different. So I guess it's a good perspective to be able to say, like, I know what it feels like in the water and I know what it feels like on the land. So when a runner's injured, and they say like, I don't want to swim, or like, I can't. And it's like, I know it feels weird. And you feel like you're like very out of breath and you're just like, this is so hard and running is so easy. And for swimmers, it's kind of like that same feeling of, wow, like I thought running is something that everyone does, or like we're born to run. But it's a learned process. So you just get better at it as you go.
Yeah. I mean, I think back to my run this morning where I'm running, and I've been running for quite a bit of time, at least at the capacity that I'm running right now. I always like to point that out, where I'm like, I'm going on 11 years. Like this year, I can say I'm going on 11 years of running at this capacity. In the past, I would run like here and there just to, uh, on the treadmill or to do some kind of working out. And even having been someone who's consistently running, like this morning, I was running and I'm like, oh, I sound so loud. Like my breathing felt like it sounded loud. My footfall sounded like it sounded loud. And it was one of those things where I'm like, oh, this is not, I don't feel graceful. I actually feel really heavy. And, I started to go through that process of like, all right, can I relax my shoulders? Like, where is it that I'm kind of holding the weight that's making it heavy? And then also like, is it just that quiet outside? Like I started my run this morning at 5:45. So no one was out. So I'm like, all right, Steph, also remember that no one is here. Like you're going to hear everything. And that is probably one of the stranger parts of running, particularly like if you don't listen to music or you don't have your headphones on, you're tuning into the sounds of your body in a different way. Is there anything comparable with that in swimming? Because I feel like, I mean, swimming, you would hear the water, but is there, and you said you're breathing, like the heavy breathing.
Yes. I would say for me, I don't listen to music when I run, and I know that it's not normal, but the same thing in the pool. It's almost, there are a couple people that will listen to waterproof, like earphones, but for the most part, it's you and your thoughts. And so it allows you to just get into a rhythm, into a sync. And you're right. Sometimes you feel it in the pool in the same way when you're running, you just don't feel right. You just feel a little off for that day. But often I find like when I warm up, that does kind of go away. But I'd equate going for a run outside, especially, to open water swimming, because it's like you in nature and you can just listen to the sounds around you. And we've moved all over from like being in the inner cities to like we're kind of in the country now, but to like a suburb. So different sounds are, when you're running. And when you're swimming, it's like you don't really have many sounds except for the sound of the water around you. Or if you're in a pool and your coach is yelling at you, or you hear whistles or something. But it's kind of nice to be able to just zone out and just be able to focus on your form and your breathing. And for me, it's my time to think, because of having children, and because I feel like you're either working or like with your children and you don't have a lot of for me, I feel like my self-care time is when I'm running or swimming or cycling or lifting or anything that's my own self-care. And so it's my time to think and my time to just kind of be in my thoughts. And everywhere else, I feel like it's like something else is always consuming my thoughts. So
Yeah, I agree with that. That was a few years ago. I would do my runs after dropping my kids off from school. And I remember I had a friend, an Instagram friend, and he would always wake up and do his runs at like 4, 5 o'clock in the morning. And there was one day where I messaged him and I'm like, I don't know how you do that. Like, how are you waking up that early? And he told me, oh, I just do it. Challenge yourself to do it for 21 days, 21 days, if you do it for 21 days, you make a habit. And I said, okay, I'm going to give it a try, see if I can commit to that. And it was really hard. It is still very, very hard. But to have that time to myself in the morning before my kids are awake, before I call it the morning rush of getting kids ready for school, out to school. And my kids are older now, so they do everything. They get themselves ready, they get dressed, they get their backpacks ready, they prepare themselves breakfast. But even then, there's still this rush of getting out of the house. And it is that time in the morning is my time for myself. So in those moments where my alarm goes off and I'm like, I don't want to get out of bed, I don't want to do this, I remind myself of, hey, this is your time. Like, this is your time when everyone is at home safe. No one needs you at the moment, because that's part of it too, of like feeling at least for myself, guilty when I go and do my run, say in the afternoon or in the evening, or I go do a class in the evening or something like that. There is that element of guilt of like, oh, I'm not home and I'm not with these people and all this. The brain chatter is so loud that it, for me, it's like, okay, it's worth it. Like that 4:30 a.m. alarm clock during the week, it sucks, but it's also worth it because it is that time that I have for myself to, yeah, be with my thoughts before anything else comes into the picture.
Yeah, 100%. I agree. It's, I've even had my boys will wake up early and I'm like, this is mommy's time. You need to go back up. It's not time for you guys to get up. They are younger and they have a wake clock where it turns green when they're supposed to be getting out of bed. So I'll say like, if your train isn't green, it's time, you need to go back to bed and, have quiet time in your room. But it's a very, like, if I am training again, they're still so young that when it's nice out, it's winter here in New York, so it's too cold for me to push them, but I've always pushed them in the double jogger and then the single jogger. Now the one bike's next to me while I push the one in the jogger. And so we still have like time together, and like that's like kind of like our mommy and like me time, but at the same time it's me with them. And so it's like I have to have that morning, that peace and quiet, and it's just that time to just do my own stuff. And I love my children so much, and I do have that guilt if I am doing something. And it's just, for me, I think I'll always be a morning person for that sole reason of, I think we all need our own time. And for most of us that are parents, or I think especially moms, that, when we're taking care of kids and, running a house or a job, and we need to have our own quiet time. So as much as it's a challenge to get up, and my alarms, it's like a typically 5, like the number 4 sometimes appears on my clock, but typically 5 is my number.
Yeah.
And so, but I get it. It's worth it for me. And I would say for anyone who hasn't crossed that threshold of, I just can't do it, to do what your friend had said, like, just try it and remember your why. Like if you find like you're either skipping workouts, or like you just like they're haphazard at the end of the day or like they're too late at night and they're like, and then you're up all night, then the next day doesn't start off right because you've now just been running like at 9 o'clock at night because like you couldn't get it in. So it's like, if you get up, it's going to be done. It's your own quiet time, and you can move the rest of your day. I think in a better mood. I think a less stressed mood. I think you're setting yourself up for success when you're getting that run done before the day is started.
Oh yeah, I agree. I feel like I get ahead of the day when I wake up early and run. And I feel like I get ahead of the day because I come home and I have my breakfast and then I take my kids to school, and then I can kind of continue on with my day without having the weight of, oh, I have to do that run later, or I have to figure out what are we going to have for dinner and when are we going to have that dinner, and can I prepare the dinner ahead of time so that, and it definitely gets trickier. I feel like too, like when your kids get older. So my daughter, she's 12. She'll be 13 next month in February. And she has her own little clock. She likes, by 6 o'clock, she likes to eat. Like, and if the food isn't ready by that time, she gets very angry.
Oh.
And it's so even something like that, like for me, running later in the day just logistically gets so much more complicated. So I appreciate that you brought that up, because I think if people can just give it a try for a little bit, again, not to say that it's easy, it is a challenge, but you might rediscover that the format of your days, or even the flow of your days, changes for the better.
Agreed. And it is hard, and it's something that you have to, be prepared for. But I feel like the end, or like the result, is so much better than just, yeah, it stinks to have to get up early. But when you feel so much better and you notice the benefit and you notice you're less stressed, because if you're trying to plan dinner, or if the kids have sports or activities, and you're like, okay, well, so-and-so's here, and then we've got dinner here, and then it's just like, if it's like, and I find it's like, it's done. Like you're just moving on with the day, and then there's nothing else. Like, of course there's more stress, but from how can I get my workout in stress, it's no big deal. And so I think the pushback from athletes, I don't want to have to get up that early. It's like, I promise it's not going to be easy, but it's going to make you feel better. And so I feel like if they can at least trust us as coaches enough to be like, I'm willing to give it a shot, then they might find that it really does benefit them.
Yeah. How did you become a coach, or when did you become a coach?
Gosh, so I definitely didn't start off coaching. So when I graduated from college, my undergraduate was in a dual exercise physiology and nutrition, just plain old nutrition. And I really thought I was going to go probably back to med school because I love helping people. And I thought, well, I'll become a doctor or a physician's assistant. And so in order to apply for med school and do physician's assistant, I was told I should be working in the hospital in something clinical. And so I got a position in the cardiac cath lab, which is where if someone has a heart attack, they go in and I ran the machines. So did not put anything into the people. I was running the machines for the doctors who were actually doing all the surgery. And it was that time that I was kind of like transitioning out of swimming in college and thinking, I need to do something. So at the hospital, our hours were like 6 a.m. to 4 p.m. And of course, I was not married and no kids. And I just started at the end of the day, like, oh, maybe I'll go for a run. Or a lot of people at the hospital were runners, and sometimes they ran at lunch. And so they would just because we got scrubs at the hospital. So we had to wear scrubs that were provided. So we would just take off our scrubs, put on some running clothes, go for a run, and then put on new scrubs. And so yeah, you might be sweaty, but you're wearing your hair pulled back. You've got like scrub caps on, you have masks before COVID, and then clean scrubs. So it really was like not a big deal. And so that's kind of how it started. And then someone was like, well, you were a swimmer and now you're running, you should try a triathlon. So I was like, oh, that's a good idea. So that kind of started like my endurance adventure. And I really found I gravitated towards trail running. I think my personality is I'm more of a trail runner. I grew up hiking and just doing a lot of like outdoor like camping, and so just trail running just felt almost like home, like coming home. And I found that it was not to change the topic, but I had suffered with an eating disorder for many years, and that was through college and then beyond. And I felt like there was a lot of pressure and a lot of competition to be very fast. And I did swim at a Division I school, so there was a lot of pressure to be a certain speed and look a certain way and achieve a certain, level at the school or at the university. And as a trail runner, I felt I didn't have to wear a Garmin or my watch. This is like, way back. I mean, there was Garmin, but it was so technology was not there back in 04, 05. So I didn't wear a watch, and it was me in the woods by myself, and I could walk when I wanted, power hike up the hills. I could run when I wanted, and there was no judgment of, oh my gosh, like that was a 15-minute mile, that was an 8-minute mile, that was a 7-minute mile, that was a 12-minute mile. There's no judgment because you're trail running. Like it's supposed to be for fun. And of course there are trail runners that are very fast and they care. But for me, it was such a change from coming from a high pressure, competition sport to doing something for the pure fun of it and the pure love of it, and to have something that I didn't feel I was being judged for. So that's kind of how I started. And then it kind of transitioned. Because I had the exercise physiology background and the nutrition background, people would ask me questions and I'd start giving advice. And then even though I wasn't super fast, I was at that point fairly fast. And so I think it kind of just attracts people when you're able to say like, well, are you feeling this way? Or, how I love strength and conditioning. So I could say like, well, what are you doing for strength training? And I could help them that way. And that kind of just slowly started to, just the more people ask questions and the more I like to help them, I thought, you know what, instead of becoming a doctor and being in this position, which is wonderful for so many people, but just was not meant for me, I realized, what if I could help people and even from a nutrition standpoint, help athletes before they got to the point of an eating disorder? Because if I could stop them before they got there, they'd never have to go down that path of that suffering that I had gone through. So it almost became my mission to be very vocal about eating disorders and about running or any sport, really, less about the competition and more about doing it for the pure love of it. And while you want to get better and be faster, but at the same time realizing that you are not defined by your times, you are not defined by how much you weigh, you are a individual, and we want to be focused on, that, and not like, you're a good person just because you are, not because you've just won a race, or not just because, you weigh, this amount of, weight. And so that became kind of like my, just that was like the catalyst, I guess. I realized that I could use, without even realizing I was doing it, I was like using that as like a catalyst to like start to get the message out there that nutrition and running specifically didn't have to be this big competition for who can be the fastest or the leanest out there. That was long-winded. I'm sorry.
No, I appreciate that, because there are a few things that like little threads that I want to follow here, right? So you went from the pool,
Mm-hmm.
which sounds like a highly competitive environment, to something like trail running, which wasn't competitive. And I think of trail running and I am in awe of trail runners, because that truly does feel like a part of running that isn't so focused on time.
Mm-hmm.
And again, like you said, there are, like, we had, and I'm sure you probably followed along with like the Bandera race this past weekend, and seeing what people, 100K, how they're, I think the person who won it was like, I don't even know, but under 10 hours,
Yeah,
right?
amazing.
It's like, it's so I find that, yes, you have those faster people. There's fast people everywhere, but it really does seem like road running is where people hyper focus on the fast. And I guess you can tell me if I'm wrong or right in any of this, or if I'm just totally missing the mark, because I feel like with road runners, there is so much more talk about food, nutrition, and even that mentality of, to get faster, you have to be skinnier. And it's like, no, 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 no. Like, that's totally not it, at least. And maybe that's just me coming from a place of being more in the road running community versus the trail running community. But I've always seen trail running as a place of, one, it's a lot harder than road running.
It's
But
different. It's
yeah,
different muscles, different strengths. But you're right. It's a different community, I'd say. Like if you could like break it down, I'd say like the word I'd go with is it's a community of people that are less focused on time and more encouraging. I feel like there certainly are egos in everything you do, but there's less ego and there's less focus on your speed and your time, because it's more about the challenge of a 50K with 6,000 feet of climbing is much different than like even a road 50K or a marathon that has several hundred feet of climbing. Like, so they're two totally different beasts, we'll say. Like, you train for them differently, and it takes a different mentality, because I'd say they're painful in different ways. Like a road marathon, you're probably going to be feeling more of like a threshold effort. You're putting more out there from a very steady, consistent. So it's painful in that sense. But a trail marathon is painful because it's more of you're going to have to power hike, and you're going to have to be avoiding rocks and roots. And it could be the conditions might be more brutal as you climb up, different peaks and then coming down. So depending on like whether it's just like a trail marathon or half marathon, or if you're doing a 50K or a 100K or a 100 miler, or like with nutrition, I work with athletes like they're doing like 200 milers or like really long, 4 or 5 day trail runs. And that's less about the conditioning of an athlete and how fast they are versus like the mental aspect and the physical conditioning of a strength and resiliency to maintain over several days. And so I think like that's just like it's like a different mindset, a different kind of community focus, because one is like road running, which I also love. And most of my athletes do tend to be road runners. But I do love the trail runners. So I think it's more of I want to get faster at either a 5K or 10K or half marathon. And then the ultras are more like, help me run my first 50 miler, or help me to get stronger and stay injury free as I'm doing this thing that has 10,000 feet of climbing. So they're very different. And I think it's just different personalities are attracted to different styles. And I just, at that time in my life, I really needed like almost like a safe place to go that was going to be accepting, and it didn't matter how fast I was, or, you know, how thin I was. And it's, you know, so there's definitely differences, but they're both good. That's not to say that one is better. It's just a different personality. It will fit and sometimes you transition back and forth.
Yeah, I've done one trail half marathon, and it was, I think it was back in 2014, maybe.
Okay.
And I remember, or I don't even know, whenever I did it, I had already done several road half marathons. And I remember doing that race. And here I'm in Miami, Florida. There aren't too many trails. So this was in a park that was in North Miami Beach, and it was 3 loops. That was the course, 3 loops. And I remember doing it, being out there by myself and thinking, this is so hard, because one, the effort was different. Like, the talk about really, there was a point where I was like, oh, I'm running so fast. I know I'm running fast. And then I looked at my watch and it was a 13-minute mile.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, so we're not going to look at the watch anymore, because
Yeah.
it's not really going to help me out here. But it was also, to your point of like the mental, oh my gosh, totally different mental experience, because again, it was 3 loops and I just couldn't get my bearings. I could not. I was like, where am I? Does that tree look familiar? Like, everything was beautiful, but everything looked the same. Whereas, you know, when you're on a road race, there's the mile markers. You can feel that you're moving forward, right? Like, maybe there's more
see like aid
spectators.
stations coming, or yes, oh, this is going to be, you're getting more a cheering section coming up, and in the woods, you're like, where is everybody?
There was nothing. No, there was nothing. I was just like, I don't even hear the person in front of me. I don't hear the person behind me. And I think part of that is just, and I don't know if it's changed since I did that race, but there wasn't that big of a trail running community here in Miami. But I do look at trail running, and it's one of those things where I'm like, oh, I really want to get into something like that. I would love to try it more, but it's that change in mentality of going from the roads where it's, I guess in a way, it's a little more of like a linear mindset. Like, you start, and like you said, you have your aid stations, you have this stuff, you have just other indicators of where you are. Whereas, again, that one trail half marathon, it wasn't. I was just kind of on my own. My aid station was when I looped back before having to go back in.
Loop.
Oh yeah.
So you weren't even sure, like, am I on the right trail? Like, especially if it's like a series of trails. It's easy to get lost if you're not, you know, especially if your mind has wandered and you're running and like thinking about things, and you're just like, I haven't seen people. Like, is this the right trail?
Yeah, that happened to me a few times. And again, that was like the disorienting part of, am I in the right place? How far have I gone? Again, not wanting to look at my watch, because that takes, again, that mental shift of, oh, my effort feels like I'm here based on what I'm used to on the roads, but on the trail, it's different. And I think you also bring up this lovely point about how the expectations for the people who go on the trails is different, right? Because and again, I bring in my own personal experience of when I first started running, I did a run walk method. That's how I first started running. And I would go to these races, and anytime I took a walk break, people would tell me, come on, you can go, you can run, you can go. And I'm like, wait, I'm taking a walk break on purpose here. Whereas I feel like even like the trail runners I follow, and hearing after these big trail races, people are like, yeah, I walked, and then I climbed, and then I was on, like, I've heard of races where like it's so steep that they're on hands and knees. And like, that stuff is celebrated in the trail community. It's so weird. It's just so weird to
It's
me.
different. And it depends on how technical the trail run is. Like you can have a trail run that's like a rail trail that's like like an old railroad. And so it's like crushed gravel. And so that's kind of like a base entry into trails. And then you'll have, depends on where you are in the country, like here in the Northeast, it tends to be much more rocky, much more like technical, versus like when we lived in Oregon and Eugene, which is kind of fun for being a runner. And so the trails there are going to be different. It's like rainforest versus like, this like kind of roots and rocks, and then like the Rockies, like, so Colorado, like that's going to be a little bit different. So depending on where you are, or even like Texas, when we lived in Texas, the trails there, like some of them are quite, like there's a really great ultra Dinosaur Valley State Park, and those are beautiful trails, and but they're so different. There's not a lot of rocks and roots, and so you definitely have different stories based on where you run. Like some of the runs, like if you ever did like Mount Washington or the Presidentials, which is like up in New Hampshire, then it's going to be there's a very technical like hand over foot for part of that, the climb. So there's no way you're running like you might be like running like a couple miles per hour and you're like, this is great. Like I am going more than 1 mile an hour, like on this like really technical part. So it's just a very different mindset. And I feel you on the run walk, because while I didn't start off that way, that's how I do run now, because I have a genetic condition that has gotten a lot worse. And so one of the best ways for me to keep being able to run is by doing a run walk method. So my last race, well, actually, if it's a short race, I'll run it. But like my last half marathon, I did like a 1:30:30. Mm-hmm. And so I ran 1 minute and 30 and I walked 30. And you get that from people like, you're doing great. Like, don't walk. And it's like, no, I have to walk. Like I'm doing okay. And but that feeling of like, for me, it was a lot of shame at first, like a lot of like I didn't want people to like, oh, they're gonna look at my time and I used to be here and now I'm here. And I really feel like that's from a coaching standpoint, it's good that I've had to feel all these emotions, because I now have that empathy moving forward to other athletes if they do get injured or have something that like they still want to run, but maybe they're not going to be as fast as they once were. And I'm like, I feel you, I understand you. And I know that shame or that feeling of like, people are going to judge me, people are going to look down on me because I'm not a real runner anymore. And so I think like getting through that and finding like the running community that accepts where you are, whether that's a coach or a running shop, like a running store that has like a group run, or like if you find a Galloway method, like that's really great because like they purposely run walk. Yeah. And so like you have others surrounding you that, so like you feel like you're not alone. I think it's there's so many emotions when it comes to running. So it's you may not think of it, but it's not you, but other people, like they might be like, oh, running is a very emotional sport, but there's so much mindset involved with running.
There is, and running is very much so tied to our worth, right? Mm-hmm. Like you touched upon that. When it's like, oh, I'm not a runner. If I'm doing the run walk method, I'm not a runner. Or if I'm injured, or if I don't run X amount of miles a day, or if I don't do races, like there's all these things that we create in our head that we tell ourselves we're not runners. And I find it to be the most common in this whole like run straight versus run walk, like in those where it's like, you're both doing the mile, like you're both covering the distance. Yes. You're just doing it differently. And I find that to be something that's a little bit frustrating, particularly when we're thinking about people who are newer to the sport and who are trying to get into the sport, right? For a lot of people, I would say the vast majority of people cannot, like you're not going to wake up one day and say, oh, I want to run. And then you're going to go outside and be able to do a 5K, no problem. Like it's usually like, you're going to go out, you're going to run a few minutes and be like, wow, this is really hard. And
exactly. Yeah. And walk and breaks,
yeah.
No, how do
you talk about these issues with your athletes, right? Because this is something, obviously, a lot of people come to a run coach and again, I guess you'll have to correct me here, because do the trail runners come to you for coaching so that they can get to their race healthy and injury free, versus road runners who come to you and they're coming to you with a very specific time goal. I don't know if there's a difference between the two types of runners for you and what you see.
Yes. I definitely would say the vast majority of road runners are either having a time goal or a distance goal that has a time kind of goal attached to it. And so I'd work mainly, I'd say, with like the, I don't know how to say it, like the age group athlete or the age group runner that's been running for a while. Most of my athletes aren't brand new runners, so they're not needing like the initial like running program, but they've been running for a few years and they want to either step it up in a distance or in a time goal. And so they usually start with that from a road standpoint, like I want to qualify for Boston, or I want to, like PR, I want to have like a 15-minute PR, or I've only ever run half marathons, I want to run a marathon, or I want to run a 50K. So like there's like a goal they usually start with, whereas a trail runner is definitely like, they have a goal in mind, but there's absolutely no time goal. Unless it's, I just want to make it before cut off, something like that. Like I want to, finish this 50 miler and I want to finish it smiling and not injured. And so it's a very different, it's a different kind of way from a coaching standpoint. And I'd say if the athlete is a newer trail runner, then it's just like a lot of like, I believe in communication is key. And I tend to be fairly open with what I tell athletes. And so I'm not, like, I try not to sugarcoat things, and I'll say things like, it's okay to hike, it's okay to walk. I literally want you, if you have to tape your Garmin, like literally with like, put on a masking tape or a painter's tape and literally cover it. Maybe you want to know how long you ran. And so that way you can still hit the stop and start button, but do not look at the face. Do not try to tell yourself, oh my gosh, it's a 13-minute mile and I'm normally running like 10-minute miles. Like it's such a mindset shift that I try to be really open to say, you're going to be slower. Like you're going to be walking, like it's, and then from the road runner standpoint, I do say things like, if I'm looking at someone's physiological markers, like, and I use Training Peaks as my like coaching platform, but if I'm looking and I'm seeing that they're training for a marathon, but by the time they hit like 10 or 11 miles and they're at a nice aerobic pace, but they're having like then all of a sudden like they're tanking, I say, I think we should start with a walk run until you're able to say hit those miles where you're like, you can consistently hang here. And most will give me pushback at first. And they're like, I don't want to be a walk runner. And I'm like, how about we just start with a 9-1, where every 9 minutes you take a 1-minute walk break, 1-minute walk break, you do some nutrition, hydration, and then you keep going. And most of the time they come back and they're like, I can't believe how much better I felt. I can't believe how much faster I was, because that small walk break allowed them to get their nutrition in, kind of refocus, reset. And it also trains their body to start again. I think that's the problem is a lot of runners and just athletes, like triathletes fall into this category when they're racing. They never practice restarting. So in a race, if they stop at an aid station, they're not used to stopping and maybe they try to run through it and then they splash, drink all over themselves. And so the next one, they're like, I'm going to stop. And then they stop. And then their muscles are saying to them, like, don't go. This is nice. You have now just given me a rest. Whereas if you practice that walk run, your body's like, time to start again. And it's so much easier to restart. And I think that's like a difference that you just have to tell them, like it's not that you're not a good runner. It's just you might be more efficient if we can do this. And I don't have all my athletes do that, but if I see that they're not able to do these longer runs yet, then I think it's a good strategy to work in while either they build or they find that I am actually faster doing this. And so, yeah.
How do you have that conversation with them? Because that's something that I've been really interested in understanding how each coach navigates having those difficult conversations. Because again, going back to what I said earlier, runners do have a tendency to tie their worth to how they perform, right? Like your worth, which I think is just bogus. But how do you have those conversations with people of like, hey, walking doesn't make you any lesser of a runner. It doesn't make you a bad runner. And yeah, how do you have that conversation? And then how do you get them to buy into it, to at least trying?
Exactly. And then sometimes it's really hard. And sometimes I'll know the athlete well enough at that point to be like, I know I'm going to get pushback. and some I know already do trust me well enough that I can approach it in that way. And I do try to since I try to be very forthcoming from the front, like I'm always kind and empathetic with my athletes, but at the same time, I always try to, when we do our weekly check-ins, I tell them how their training's going. I'll say things like, well, I noticed your heart rate, was spiking here. Was there something I wasn't seeing that was happening? Like, did you feel dehydrated? Was it a very hot day? Like, was there something going on? And if there wasn't, then I do have that conversation of, I think that you might have been starting off too hard, even though that's a pace I might have told them. I want to back it off. And so I'll kind of start that kind of giving that feedback right away. So when I do have feedback, I feel like later on as they're progressing in their long runs, I feel like they might be more open because I've given them more feedback from the beginning about how their body is just physiologically responding. And so some will be like, okay, I'll give it a shot, even though that they totally are feeling like I'm not a real runner, or, like that makes me uncomfortable just thinking about that. And then I'll say like, I promise, let's just give it a couple times. And if the couple times you do it, you're hating it, like we can go back and talk about trying something else. But most of them by that point most people don't get to me and they're at marathon distance already. And then they're, so they're not already running 20 miles, that they might be running like 6 or 8. And so that we have time to kind of work through that communication. So I really feel like communication and being just honest and at the same time, I'm never going to tell an athlete like something like, what in the heck happened? Like, that was so slow. Like, oh my gosh, I would never say anything like that, but more of like, tell me what was going on, because I see your heart rate did this, or I see your pace did that. And that kind of opens the door to being able to say like, because I'm seeing these things happen, let's try this and see what your body does. And then that kind of like, instead of just saying you have to do a walk run, let's just say like, let's see physiologically, like what happens to your heart rate, what happens to your pace from like where you were at mile 3 to where you were at mile 16. Can you still maintain that same pace given this 9:1 or 9:30:30 versus a straight run? And if they start off here and then like their pace is doing one of these, and in that run walk, if they're able to maintain their entire pace, and if this was faster run walk than a straight, then it's like, oh, I was actually faster and I felt better. Like, kind of like lets them like almost like see it themselves. And I kind of just say like, let's try this and see. And then they're like, oh, this is really great. And again, not everyone does a run walk method. It tends to be anyone I find slower than like a 3:30 marathon. I tend to encourage them to try it. And if you're faster than that, we generally don't need to do it. That except in an Ironman, then I'd pretty much tell people you have to do a run walk to get your nutrition in the marathon in an Ironman. But in a standalone marathon, it's definitely in a road race. In a trail, you're going to be walking, so or hiking or power walking. So it's not even a like, let's talk about it. Like it's like they're like, when unless it's a like a rail trail very flat, then maybe we can talk about it. But if there's any kind of elevation built in, you're not going to be running those hills. Like you're just, or if you do, that's setting you up to walk the entire rest of the way. So so it's a little bit easier from that trail standpoint, because it's almost an expectation that you're hiking, power walking for a lot of it.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense, because what I'm hearing from you, and this kind of goes to like what your coaching style is, right? Where there's a lot of communication that goes on, and even just do you do weekly check-ins with all your athletes regardless of where they are in their training?
I do. So I use email, but more I've actually moved towards Voxer. Have you ever heard of Voxer? So it's an app, and it's actually a walkie-talkie app, but we don't use it as a walkie-talkie. Like you hold the button down and you leave a message. But what I was finding is a lot of I like most runners were a lot of type A. They might be, like a lawyer, a veterinarian, or, a business finance. And I can't be like calling them or like leaving them messages, like when they're like in the middle of a dental procedure, so with Voxer, what it allows me to do is I can leave them a voice message at any time of the day. If they have their phone on silent, then they won't hear anything. If they have it on like loud, they'll hear like a beep beep, which just means like I've left them a message. But there's no interruption, as in like it's not a phone call, it's not a text. And so it frees up your phone from like always getting inundated with texts or calls. And I can leave them. So it's usually once or twice a week. I usually do Mondays and Thursdays or Tuesdays and Fridays, unless they're racing, and then it'll be, different. But I just get on and I look at Training Peaks, and I'm like, I'll hold my little button down and I'll talk into my phone, and I'll just be like, hey, so-and-so, like taking a look at your workouts, and it looked like, Monday, like this was going on, look really great. And then Tuesday, like maybe you were struggling with that pace, but tell me, how did it feel? How was your nutrition or hydration here? And then what I like about Voxer is it's quicker for them versus like they don't always have time to sit and email these like long in-depth responses to my questions and Training Peaks. And I can hear their voice, because our voice, even without realizing it, like if someone's had a really bad day at work, or they're very stressed, or even they're trying to tell me like, oh yeah, that run went really well, and then like you're listening to their voice and you're just like, like it didn't, or something else is going on. So I found as a coach, like it's been probably been about like a year and a half maybe that I've used it, and I felt like it's a game changer for me, because I don't have a lot of local athletes. Most of them are all over, and so I really like to be able to hear their voice and hear how they're doing. And if they're not doing well, then I can say, let's jump on a phone call, or let's schedule a call, or tell me really what's happening, because it's more of I almost feel like a life coach sometimes, but it always comes back to like, how does it work into their training? And so no matter where they are, and sometimes the Voxers are 30 seconds and they're like, hey, you had some great base runs, base training this week, and like, let me know, how's it going? And other times it's a much more like, oh, we're really looking at marathon paced, runs, or, oh, those intervals, let's go through each of the intervals. And so yes, I do still talk with my athletes, just because I want them to know that I'm there, but I also think that how I sometimes adjust their coaching will depend on their daily like stress in life. And if have young children, they're not sleeping, I can hear it in their voice, and I will say, let's take a couple of recovery days, and you got plenty of time before your race, so let's just recover. So.
I love that, because it's like run coaching with a dash of life coaching there. And
Yes.
I'm a huge fan of voice notes. Like I just send voice notes.
You should check it out.
I'm going to check it out, because I love voice notes, because I agree. And for me also, a lot of my thinking happens when I start talking, right? Like I can see data in one way, but once I start saying things out loud, then different dots get connected for me. And I think what I'm hearing from you again about like your coaching style is very much so is that like you're, even with that, sending those voice notes, you're showing the people that you work with that you're just as invested in their training as they are. Obviously, they're the ones that are doing the work, but like you're taking the time to kind of like help them process it. Because I always say too that, run coaches, we have a more global view of the training, whereas the runner individually, what they understand is kind of what they're living through right now. So like for me, it's more like, in my mind, I have yesterday's run and today's run in my head. I'm not thinking about the runs I did last week, because I'm like, those are done. We're done. Like we're good. Whereas the run coach is kind of taking in all of that information. And what I hear from you as well is that and I come back to this idea of investment, because when you give that feedback to your athletes, you're depositing into that trust bank. For a lack of a better, like not a great analogy, but it's like when you give that kind of feedback,
invested in, and I think that allows for communication to be easier when they feel like you've been watching or paying attention and have their best interests at heart. So I feel like maybe, even though I do communicate not a lot, but like I do think that it's very, very valuable as a coach. And some of my athletes, as you, I'm sure, find, like some like to talk more than others, and some are just like, give me the workouts. I don't really want to have a lot of communication or feedback. I still, like when I'm doing like an onboarding or like an athlete like consult, like initial, I will say like, I do expect my athletes to give feedback. And I do expect that at least once a week, you'll like 3 minutes, like that's all it would be. Like, you don't have to spend hours with me, but it's like, it's almost because I've been coaching for so long, I feel like now, like I know how I work as a coach, and I know how athletes that I need to work with, like, are the ones that would fit best with me. And if they're not willing to either listen to feedback or give feedback once a week, then I just know that we're not going to be the best fit. And so I'd rather approach that from the beginning versus telling someone, yeah, let's work together. And then several months of like miscommunications and like, are you doing okay? Or how are you doing? And hey, can you let me know how you're doing? Like, why are you skipping all these workouts? Like, if there's a very good reason, like, hey, I'll work with, I'll understand, let's work together. But like, if I don't know that you went on vacation, or like, oh,
Yeah.
like, like a friend died and I didn't know. And like, all of a sudden, like, you're just in training, it's red in Training Peaks. Like you had like 5 red days in a row and like, or did you get sick? Like,
Yeah.
so I found over the years, like initially I would just be like, anyone that wanted to work with me, I'd be like, yes, come on board. And then as I kind of honed, I guess, my coaching practice, I realized that not every coach is going to be a good fit for every athlete. And that's why there's so many of us.
Yeah, I love that because that was something that I realized pretty early on in my coaching where I had this mentality of like, oh, I just need to take whoever, like whoever wants me, I need to take them. And um I realized that I'm someone very similar to you, high communication. Like I need a lot of communication and it is kind of annoying sometimes when people are not used to communicating that often because people I part of the reason why I'm doing these discussions too is so that people can understand that like your coach is not just a tool, they're not just the creation of a training plan, but they're also a big resource and a big cheerleader, and they are invested in what you're doing, how you're doing, and how you're feeling when you're doing all of that. But that was something that to what you shared, and that's always a question I ask of like, how do you determine whether someone's a good fit for you or not? And for me, like that's always the first red flag that I see is red flag in terms of, okay, you're not a good fit for me and I'm not a good fit for you, is that communication piece of like, oh, if you want the plan, but you don't want me to check in on you, then we're good. And then also to like your point of what you shared of like, if there's 5 days where it's in the red and you're not seeing anything, that also doesn't work for me because I need to know what's going on in your life because I like to know what's going on in your life so that then I can plan workouts that make sense with your life. I'm really big on this idea, and I've synthesized it to this statement of if it doesn't add to your life, then subtract it from your life. And that's how I feel running is something that a lot of us do as an add-on to our lives, as something extra that brings us joy or that makes us have fun or challenges us, whatever the case is. But it's like I can't help you if you're not communicating with me, if you're not telling me what's going on, because I found that one, I don't want to feel like I'm taking care of people. Like I say this and I'm like, it's harsh, it's blunt, but it's like I have 2 kids.
Okay.
I have to mother 2 kids. I don't want to mother anybody else. And I don't want to feel like I'm nagging people
Yes.
to do the work. Like
babysitting, like, and then again, it's not, to me, it's not blunt and it's nothing to feel bad about because we're all adults. I mean, unless someone's coaching, kids, and that's a different story, but we're all coaching adults who want to get better, whether it's a personal goal, maybe there's outside pressure, like they want to like look good at their, job, whatever their goal is. Like, we're not there to be a babysitter to like, why aren't you doing your workouts? Like, hey, your workouts aren't being done. All right, what are you doing? Are you okay? Like, so that's kind of like exactly like, right. Like if we're not adding to them and we're not helping them to be happier, less stressed, be better parents, be better workers, coworkers, bosses, whatever it is in life, like life is too short to just feel like you have to be like to me, like I think of a babysitter because or like hounding people or nagging them. Like for me, I'll tell my athletes, like, if I don't know how you're doing, I will not, like, I write in 2-week blocks. So, if I don't know how you're doing and you're not filling out Training Peaks or you're not talking to me and your workouts are red, I can't literally do your next 2 weeks because I don't know how you are. Like, I'm not going to keep building if you're falling behind or you're injured or you're sick. And so I feel like when that's a very like, red flag or big clue that they're not the right fit. And I'll say something like, hey, maybe a more of a stock plan where you just get a plan and go, and you you go, and then you don't have to like worry about other people. But people for me hire me, and it sounds like you, like, because they want us to help them get better. And if we're not providing that, like, we work hard for our athletes, and for me, I expect my athletes to work hard for me, meaning it's like a mutual respect of,
Yep.
they can expect that I'm going to work hard, and I'm going to expect that they maybe not like physically, like they have to follow the plan, but if they're not trying to follow the plan, or they're not trying to communicate, then I just feel like it's, why are they wanting to spend money with me if what I'm offering is not what's good for them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. I mean, I've definitely had conversations with athletes where it's been situations where I feel like I have to give them permission to let me go, right? Where I'm like, hey, if this isn't serving you, or you don't have the space for this right now, we can always stop. I want you to know that it's okay. Like, and I try to make it very, very clear to people that it's like, this is supposed to be something fun. Yes, there's challenging, but for me, I'm like, I try to explain to people, we have enough in our lives that we have to do, that we can't negotiate around them. We have to do that. Moving our bodies physically, like any workout regimen, any movement practice, that should be something that you're choosing to do. So I also believe that every person has their preferred movement modality, and that sometimes it just takes a little bit of time exploring different movement modalities to figure out which is the one that makes the most sense for you.
Yes.
But I've definitely had to have that conversation with a few athletes of like, is this really what you want to do? Because it's okay. Like, again, I don't want people feeling like they have to give me excuses or they have to justify. I'm like, no, like, we're good. Like, you don't have to tell me I had all this stuff going on. It's fine. Like, I'm here to try to help you fit this into your life. But if you feel like you have to give me excuses for why it's not happening, then let's take a moment to pause and really figure out, is this something that does make sense for you right now? Because if it does, cool, we'll kind of figure it out. But then even then it's like, oh, if it does, but you're still not making the changes in your life to fit it in, then really let's kind of explore what's actually going on here. And I find that I've had people where they just want to try running. Like, they're like, everybody's doing it, like, or they're like, everybody's doing it, so it seems like the thing that makes sense for me to do. And then they do it, and it's like, it's just not their movement. Like, that is just not their thing. And I'm like,
okay.
Totally cool. Like, it's totally fine. So you said you usually have a consultation with people. What is that process like for people working with you? Do they usually send you a message? Is it reaching out through your website? Is there a consultation? How is that onboarding process for you?
Yeah, so I'd say now I'm a very referral based. So most of my athletes do come to me, and then if it's a referral, someone will be like, oh, well, so-and-so might reach out to you because I referred them, or I'll get an email and say, and that says so-and-so, has coached you or is your coach. And I just want to talk about coaching. Sometimes they'll reach out with like a contact form on my website or through social media. Then very first thing I do is I send them a link to my scheduling software, and I just say, hey, find a free like 20-minute time, and let's just make sure we're a good fit. And then I'll ask basic questions like, what are you training for? What's your experience? What are you looking for in a coach? And then I kind of give my philosophy, and then I'll say like, it's okay if I don't sound like the right fit for you, I can always refer to another coach. And I just, try to like make it clear from that initial call, like, of my expectations. And then I want to hear their expectations. And then if it's a good fit, then they fill out a questionnaire, and we'll have another phone call, and then we'll make a plan on, their life and their work and their, like what's happening. And then that's kind of how we start. In Training Peaks, I'll kind of outline several, first 2 weeks, and then like look at their overall life and like their strength training history and their nutrition history. And it's kind of like all my one-on-ones have a little bit of access for all of that. And so I just kind of build out a plan based on those initial conversations. And then those expectations of, I'll be emailing you or Voxering you on a Monday or a Thursday or a Friday, just depends. And then that's kind of it just gets going. And it takes a couple of weeks. And I always say, as a coaching relationship, I usually say 3 months is a really good time frame for me as a coach to learn about you and for you to learn about me. And I'll never lock anyone in. Like I do try to say like, oh, 3 months minimum. But if, after a month, if you're like, you are just not the right fit, like, it's okay. I'll never be like, well, you told me,
Yeah.
So it's, so that's kind of how I progress. And then, yeah. And then a lot of my athletes do end up staying for quite a number of years just because we develop that rapport and that relationship. And so that's really nice that I get to know them on that deeper level, but like their families and then it's nice. So
You briefly mentioned your philosophy. If you had to bring it all together in one sentence.
Ooh, that's a tough one.
Yeah, that is a tough one. What would you say is your coaching philosophy?
I would say like my coaching philosophy is one where I try to meet the athlete where they are from a physical, mental, like emotional, even nutritional standpoint. And I try to make them better, more efficient, less stressed on their way to help them meet their goal. So that was very like fluent and terrible, but like I try to tell the athlete that like wherever their goal is, I'm going to help them to reach it through the steps of emotional health, physical health, nutritional health, like lifestyle, like sleep and stress. And so like my philosophy is it has to be an all-in-one. Like I just can't give you running workouts and then just be like, go. Like because I feel like as a one-on-one coach, at least if someone just wanted a plan, then that would be a different thing. And that's a different level of coaching. But for one-on-ones, like my philosophy is it's the whole athlete. And that means like I have 6 pillars. So the 6 pillars are mindset, lifestyle, which is typically sleep and stress and family, daily nutrition, race day nutrition, endurance training, which is the running, and then strength and conditioning. So those are my 6 pillars. And each of my athletes we have to make sure we're touching on each of those 6 pillars, not every week, but just as a whole. Like we look at the big picture and are we always making sure each of these 6 pillars are being met in the season?
I appreciate that because I perceive us runners as being dynamic creatures. And I feel that the relationship with the coach has to be dynamic as well. Right. Like you do have to take the context into a person's life into account and into consideration when you are working with them and helping them get to their goals, because oftentimes your life off the run is going to have to adapt and adjust to the training you're doing for your goal. Out of curiosity, what is the biggest thing you see nutrition wise that runners do that frustrates you the most?
There's a lot, but I'd say like the biggest ones I could say like some bullet points would be, one is that they're afraid to gain weight, so they underfuel. And that plays a role in their daily nutrition and in race day nutrition when they're thinking, they take a gel, once every 2 or 3 hours. And you're just like, oh my gosh, no, your body's getting depleted. Like this is for marathon, not for like a 5K or 10K, but for longer races, like they're worried about taking on fueling. So they minimize it because they're like, I don't want those extra calories. Or they think I'll do that on race day, but I'm not going to train with my nutrition. And then what happens is we have to train our gut like we train our body. And if we haven't trained our gut to accept things like gels or chews or bars or even whole food, then on race day, you get out there thinking, well, I'm going to be taking my gels and my chews and my bars. Your body's going to say, no, thank you. Like it is not at all prepared for that. So I'd say if I could have 2 categories, daily would be they're afraid of the calories and afraid of overfueling. And so they end up underfueling. And then race day, they never practice their race day nutrition, thinking that my body can handle it on race day and I'm just going to do it. And then they'll end up with GI distress or they have to stop taking food because then their stomach's nauseous. Then that the last like 10 miles of that marathon, they're like sick to their stomach and not taking any fuel. So they're like, it's like a struggle bus to like just finish. So that's like my race day, kind of what I see happen a lot.
Yeah, I often say that like, let's not introduce any unknowns on race day, because race day, you're going to have nerves and anxiety related to the race that you don't
Yes.
experience on your regular everyday runs. So I'm like, just do everything that you would do so that you're not thinking about it, right? If you already have that practice, say you're in marathon training of fueling every 20 to 30 minutes or whatever the case is, when you come to race day, it's like you don't even have to think about it. And I love that you say it's you have to train our gut like we train our bodies, because that is definitely a big part of it. I mean, I've had races where I'm just really nervous. I'm really nervous. It doesn't matter how many races I've done. I'm always nervous before a race. And it's like, okay, if I know that the nerves are going to be there, what else? Because that's going to take mental energy. So it's like, what else of my training, what else of the running can I take out of the equation so that when those nerves come, my brain isn't split trying to figure everything out.
Exactly. And even being nervous will even change the way your body is absorbing or like processing the fuel. Like if you're in this high anxiety state, excuse me, and you're just kind of in this fight or flight sympathetic nervous system reaction, and you're like, your body's like this, which is normal, and then you're asking your body to like take in this food and nutrition you haven't practiced with, or maybe you did but not enough, or in the same intensities, like.
Yep.
And yeah, so it's definitely like, so my rule is if you're doing anything over an hour and a half, it has to include your race day plan. So that's my like, you're going for an hour run. Okay, not a problem. Even 75 minutes. All right. But once you're at that hour and a half and longer, you have to be doing your race day practice. And if someone's close to a race and they still feel like they haven't dialed in their nutrition yet, I'll even say at our race, go ahead and practice, because your gut needs to have that practice and that familiarity, especially at your race intensity. So if your long runs are a minute, per mile slower than your marathon goal pace, and you get out in that marathon and you're running a minute per mile faster than your long runs without having practiced taking your nutrition in at that intensity, the gut's going to say no, thank you. It's going to have diverted blood away to the muscles, and there's not going to be, it's going to be like, what the heck are you doing? You're trying to like introduce this like high carbohydrate, high sugar product, which is okay as long as you've practiced with it. So it's definitely, I could talk for hours just on
nutrition. I'm like, that one right there. That's why I figure, I'm like, let me ask her this question, because I'm curious what she has to say. Final question. Okay. And this is, I want to preface this, there's no right or wrong answer to this. The question is, how can we make running more accessible and inclusive?
I would say it all starts with being kind and being accepting and encouraging. I think when we're at races, or even just out at the park or at a running store, and you can tell, or you'll walk up to someone and be like, hi, how are you doing? Or just even chit-chatting. Like if someone looks nervous at like a 5K, like walking up and just being like, hey, are you excited for the race? Like, I feel like the more we can be kind and welcoming on a whole to everyone, or even like all going to a run shop and saying, like, if they don't have any group runs, like offering to lead a group run. Just sorry, I do have my dog in here. If you heard him, he just shook his ears. So just, I feel like there's so much, I don't know, in life, it's just, there's so much stress, and there's so much like, people just aren't always kind. And I feel like if we always lead with kindness, and I know that probably sounds naive, but I'm very much a positive thinker, and I feel like if we can just be kind and just welcome people in, as much as say like hi, how are you, then that person's gonna be like, oh, they're talking to me, like they want to know how I am. And just being inclusive from that, especially on social media, like I always try to make sure, you're not just going to highlight people that are like, Boston qualifiers. You're going to be like, this is the first 5K, this is like, their first marathon. They, like, if we can just show as much enthusiasm around every athlete, not just the ones that we want, like I'd say like the influencer kind of like style of like, this person's really fast and we want to be like them. But if we can look at and celebrate, same thing with nutrition, we celebrate all bodies, we celebrate all speeds. So that's kind of how I try to approach my own life or my own coaching, or just to try to make sure that you're being as like open and kind and welcoming. And I feel like the more we welcome people, then the more other people will feel comfortable at joining us.
Yeah, I love that. And I agree with that because it's the more diversity in the
Mhm.
types of runners you see, the more people are going to be like, oh, there's someone that looks like me there.
Yes,
So I know that there is space for me there because it is really hard to
exactly.
be the only one of something or a
Yes.
certain pace anywhere you go. So I
Yep.
really appreciate that. And I also incredibly so appreciate what you mentioned about social media because social media now plays such a huge role in our understanding of running and what the running community looks like. And that's something that I had to have, a moment with myself of like, okay, what are the accounts that I'm following?
Mhm.
And am I following people who either look like me, who run paces like me? Like just being more aware of the information I'm taking in, because that can lead either to a comparison trap or it
Yes.
can lead me to feeling not too great about myself. And it's just having that awareness. So I like that you highlight that because I think also it's so important to remember that as runners and as people who love the sport and people who maybe want to be in the sport for a long time, defining ourselves by the numbers is like it's hard. Like that's
Yeah.
only going to get us so far. You're the and I always share for with myself where it's like, oh, the runners I was in my 20s is very different than the runner I've been
Yes.
in my 30s. And I totally expect that runner to be totally different than the runner I am in my 40s. So it's like I've been trying to over the past few years of not letting numbers weigh so heavily on
Yeah.
me when I'm changing. And so I just love that there's an effort on your part to also just highlight different kinds of runners because we really do come in all shapes, sizes, paces, life experiences, and all of that needs to be celebrated.
Exactly. There's always a time and place to highlight the winners. And like my husband is a very fast runner. And so like, yes, we can highlight, him, but at the same time, I'm a walk runner now and like I'm not as fast. And it's like doesn't make me or any of my athletes that are on the slower end any less of a runner. And I just, I always want people to understand that it's not about how fast you are that again makes you a good person, makes you a good runner. Like you're a runner because you run. Like that's literally the only qualification. Like, do you go out and like even if it's a run walk, like if you go out and run walk, like you are a runner, you are an athlete. And I think the more we can have that identity shift of you don't have to look a certain way, you don't have to have a certain time to be a runner. We are runners and we are athletes if we are setting our sights at a goal and we're making forward progress. I always try to tell my athletes, like, you're an athlete no matter what, because you have a goal that you're trying to achieve. And it doesn't matter if you're the fastest or the slowest, you're doing, again, the same distance and like you are the same. And it probably could apply to any sport out there. Like, it
Yep,
doesn't matter how good you are. If you're doing it for the love and you want to get better and just, whatever your reasons are, you're out there every day and you're just trying hard, 100%, you should be celebrated, not just the elite in our sport. So that's
absolutely.
my,
Yeah,
yeah.
I love it. I love it. Where can we all connect with you, follow you, get more information from you?
Yeah, so I have my nutrition side and then my coaching side. So nutrition, all the words are fueled. So fueled coaching, and then we have I'm a Fueled Endurance Academy, which is where all of my programs are kind of housed. And our free Facebook group called Train and Fuel. So we do a combination of training and nutrition. And then on the other side, we're Out Front is our coaching group. So pretty much I'm like all over in different spots, but nutrition and coaching places online. Oh, I should say
Awesome.
Facebook and Instagram mainly.
Yeah. Do you have anything exciting coming up?
Oh gosh, not too exciting. Just lots of training and races and nothing too exciting, I'd say. But I mean, to me, it's very exciting, but nothing like no big, like races, nothing big and exciting, just lots of fun races coming up and fun athlete races that if I get to go to watch them, that to me, that's really exciting. So looking forward to that.
Yeah, that is exciting because hey, remember, being a runner is more than just the running part. Like
Yes,
being a runner means you're going out there and you're spectating and you're supporting those and that
exactly.
are doing the running. So I love that. Christina, thank you so much for chatting with me today and for sharing all your wisdom with us. I just loved this conversation so much and I really appreciated the time you took to discuss, even just highlight the differences between trail runners and road runners. And there's such a mindset shift that we need to do around everything, around our running, around our nutrition, and around those 6 pillars that you shared with us. Like all of that, they're separate, but then they're all connected. So
they all come together. Well, thank you for having me. And I love chatting and I love talking coaching. So and nutrition and training, I could do it all day.
Yep. Well, you know, you kind of do. So it works.
They all might get bored, but we'll keep on going.
Absolutely. Well, thank you everyone for listening. We'll see you soon. And until the next time, take care. Bye, everyone.
Bye.